So today I want to follow up a little bit on something I touched on a few months ago about the finder's fee rule, the proposed rule from the SEC. They had a meeting recently at the end of July to kind of clarify, discuss what they're going to do with that because it's been sitting for 5 years. So I'm going to run through my slides real quick and talk about a couple of things that they were looking at in terms of potential changes. Let me see here. Okay, so the common issue that's been going on for decades, as far back as the beginning of my career, 25 years ago, people need to raise capital, and there are people out there who make introductions and help people raise capital. Normally, you need to be, let me switch here. So if somebody comes to you and says, I can help you raise the money you need for your company, for your fund, whatever it is, and but I want you to pay me a percentage of how much I raise. So can I pay someone based on how much money they raised? Well, normally, let's see here. Um, Normally, basically, you have to be a registered broker-dealer of securities, registered through FINRA. You have licensing, you have other things you need to do to be able to be paid a success fee, a commission, what the SEC calls transaction-based compensation, before you can get paid for helping make those introductions. There are some limited exceptions where it's introductions only. There's a rule in California, Texas, and I believe Michigan that's a very limited finder fee exemption. But the general rule is if somebody's helping you raise money, you can't just pay them a percentage of how much money they raise, which most people would like. So there are different ways that you can avoid it is basically using someone who's a placement agent or a registered broker dealer. Now, one of the things that was discussed on the call, or it was an all-day webinar on the 22nd of July with the SEC, a number of staff and committee members were there and practitioners in the area. And they basically said, hey, look, the broker dealers out there, placement agents, when you're out, either a startup, small company, a fund raising 500,000, even 5 million or $10 million, most of those broker dealer and placement agents won't touch you, especially because you're new or you're not really raising that much capital. So it's not worth it for them to even get involved. So a lot of the people are relying on finders who know networks of investors, but they want to make sure they get compensated so that they do the work for them. Some of the workarounds that people have done is um, bringing someone in as a co-GP, co-general partner. So you get a split of profits when the company or the fund or syndication is profitable. So you still get compensated. It's just you don't get an upfront amount of money when the money comes in. Another way is to set up like an SPV, single purpose or special purpose vehicle, or a fund where you get a management fee, asset management fee of, let's say, 2% based on the assets under management or capital of the company. If you bring $10 million in, you've got $10 million assets under management. In the first year, you get 2% of that as an asset management fee, which, as long as you set that up properly, is legal to do. So in some ways, you're kind of getting compensated based upon how much money you raised anyways. So that's another way people go around it. And then also, people will also set up marketing contracts where they're acting as a consultant, a financial consultant, investor relations, and they're getting paid certain fees. A lot of times it turns out that the fees that, my clients or whoever wants to pay them and ends up turning out to be based upon how much money they raise, but that's really not the way you're supposed to do it because that can land you in trouble in terms of basing the amount of compensation based upon what the person is doing. The original proposed rule was 5 years ago. It was based on a no action letter and called the Paul Anka case from 91. And basically, it was like you make an introduction only, nothing else. And you make an introduction of, hey, here's back in the day, a Rolodex, a list of some investors, potential people you could talk to. And then that's all you do. You just hand that off. In reality, that never really happens. Usually that finder is involved somehow in going back and forth. So the proposed rule was an exemption from having to be registered as a broker-dealer of securities within certain a framework. And the easiest way to do this is to pull up the slide from the the SEC actually prepared a slide. So let me see if I can switch that over. And okay. All right, so let me switch that over to the slide that the SEC prepared. All right, and this was actually referred to throughout the conversation a couple weeks ago with the SEC, where they did talk about the different tiers. So originally they had set it up to where there's tier one and tier two founders or finders, and depending on how involved you are and what you're allowed to do, you could potentially get paid based on money raised. So off on the right, you've got a registered broker-dealer check mark because you can do all these things that are listed here. Tier one and tier two. Tier one was kind of like for a one-time deal with limited involvement. Tier two was you're more involved and you can get paid transaction-based compensation. You're more directly involved in sort of the negotiation of the offering. All of these, including the discussion that the SEC had, and they're going to propose a new rule, hopefully, where they combine tier one and tier two. They didn't like the idea of separating them out because it didn't really make much sense. And realistically, there's hardly anyone's going to be a tier one-time introduction type of person. You have to go to accredited investors only. There was discussion of putting a cap on compensation. So 4 and 5% success fee were some of the numbers that were discussed. We don't know if that's what they'll put in the proposed rule, but there could be a cap of you can get paid based on how much money you raise, but it's up to a certain cap, like maybe a 5% maximum compensation that you can get. It's probably going to be limited to accredited investors only. Uh, they did discuss that you need to be able to be involved, these permitted activities here and kind of the grayish area, more than just providing investor contact info. Usually there is some interaction, some back and forth between that finder and the issuer, the people raising money, and the investor. So the SEC or this committee had talked about, yeah, we do need to allow them to have some freedom to go back and forth, maybe not change or negotiate the terms of the offering, but at least be able to forward offering materials from the issuer and discuss those a little bit more, distribute them to their investors. Um, and so there was a little bit of discussion over that. And so I think the proposed rule will probably allow all of this middle box that are checked in the allowed exemption that they're going to propose, probably a maximum on transaction-based compensation, 4 to 5%, somewhere in there, and some limitations on what they can and can't do. So we'll wait and see uh, in the next maybe month or two what a proposed rule looks like. Then the process is they submit it for comments. So the public, anyone can submit a comment saying, you know what, you should change this or this looks good. They may revise it. Eventually, they'll put it up for a vote. So the SEC has to finally approve it. And then once it's approved as a rule, then it goes effective after it gets published. And then a certain time period goes by, usually 60 days. So realistically, any finder's fee to be allowed to be paid, that rule probably won't be in effect for probably a year, maybe, but at least there is some hope on the horizon. So hopefully this covered some of the basics. You can look at the sec.gov. There's probably some notes and more on their discussion of this. They had a committee on it, and we'll see where it goes from there. Thanks for watching.